Hello and welcome to the Creative Network. My name is Richard Tomlinson and I'm fortunate enough to work on a project called Ignite Somerset, which is a project that's managed by Somerset Film and funded by Arts Council England. And I get to work with artists in the county and collaborate with artists and community as well and explore the creative potential of digital technology. Our base is the Engine Room, home to Somerset Film in Bridgewater. And normally the Creative Network would come to you from the Engine Room. We'd be at the Engine Room together and we'd meet the artist. But for obvious reasons, over the past 12 months, we've been doing the Creative Network online via Zoom or a live stream. And that's what we're doing this month. We're having a chat with Theatre Maker Selina Keedwell, who's based in Somerset, and we're currently working together on a digital theatre installation that's going to soon go live at the Princess Theatre in Burnham on Sea. But we first met a few years ago on a project that she was running called The Pack, and it's a verbatim theatre piece. I didn't know what that was either until Selina explained what recorded delivery verbatim theatre actually is, and she'll tell us more about that in the conversation. So first of all, Selina, welcome to the Creative Network, and tell us a little bit about that first collaboration that we had on The Pack.
Yeah, so The Pack is a recorded delivery verbatim piece that uses the real words of members of a community in Burnham on Sea following the death of Charlie Marks, who was a young lad who sadly took his own life after a period of ill mental health. And I was really intrigued by there's a really big story behind that. So trying to simplify sort of 5 years worth of work into a sentence is really difficult. But I wanted to reflect people's experiences around ill mental health and how family members are affected, and to specifically look at young males. And the way that recorded delivery verbatim works is that it captures the voice of a person who will then become a character. So we remove all identity from the voice. The person then becomes a character, and that evolves into a story that is firmly rooted in real experience. And recorded delivery verbatim technique uses the voice exactly as it's heard from that person, from that character. So any utterance, any pause, any hesitation, raise and inflection, laughter, the aim is that the actor captures that completely as it is. And so this went through a really long process of development, but in a nutshell, the final piece used non-actors, if you like, to speak the words of the characters' experiences. So people were given a set of headphones, and they were asked to listen to the voice and to repeat exactly what they heard. And it was an incredibly powerful experience for the audience and for me as a theatre maker to go through that process of exploring, how can we retell this story in the most honest way possible. We don't want to act, we don't want to take away from the truth, because that's where the power comes in sharing story specifically around ill mental health and well-being. So that was The Pack. I hope that summarizes The Pack in a sort of couple of minutes.
I remember the first time we got together at the Brewhouse Theatre at the Scratch performance event. It was called Barn, and it was an event managed by Take Art. And we got together and we performed it for the first time in front of an audience. How was that for you? We're taking it from the Engine Room as a sort of concept to actually taking it live in front of an audience at the brew house?
Slightly terrifying. I think that so we use a program which I'm sure you talk about in more detail, which we used a program called Isadora, which is a creative digital technology program. And through Isadora and I'd edited the clips previously in Audacity. So we had a whole kind of sharing, a performance sharing, but we'd never rehearsed that with actors. So hypothetically, we had made this show using creative digital technologies, scripting it over at least 2 years, I would say, into a short, accessible piece for non-actors. So much work had gone behind the scenes before putting that out to an audience. On top of that, there was a lot of personal material from my own life, which I then performed as the narrator to be able to piece these pieces together and almost kind of live direct the non-actors on the stage. So it had all been kind of up here working for a long time without the performers, if you like, and without an audience, and putting that on a stage was absolutely terrifying. I think the amount of artistic risk behind the scenes was probably, hopefully, unknown to an audience watching it. So it was kind of very carefully crafted. And also, Rich, you and I had a little bit of a backup where we had pockets of improvisation. So if the technology did go wrong, then we could cover that by improvising this kind of game that was meant to happen.
What's interesting about the pack is that, particularly when we showed it as a performance, it's part performance, part theatre, and part kind of social documentary. It's hard hitting, it's powerful, it's quite gritty at times. And I wondered what you thought about that. Is it a piece of theatre, or is it a social commentary, or is it a bit of both?
In the journey and making the piece, I worked with actors, I worked with teenagers, I worked with adults in recovery, I worked with lots of different people in testing out this material. And what I found was that whenever a performer had heard the material sort of more than 3-4 times, it started to become a performance rather than a truthful voice. And so the creative aim of keeping that fresh and real and true was really realized on the stage, I think. And yeah, the beauty of the material is that you could then take that anywhere with any audience and any performer, experienced or not. And then it will always, after maybe a rocky period of trying to learn the technique, the truth will come through, the truth in the words.
Okay, tell us about the Mothers in Lockdown project and those initial experiments that we carried out, looking at how we could bring a digital element into the Mothers in Lockdown performance.
Yeah, so like the pack, I'm really interested in material that is relevant to a certain period in history, or that I connect with on a personal level. And obviously we've all experienced lockdown, which was this material was collected in the first lockdown, so in a very intense period. I mean, it's only a year ago, but it feels like already that's a piece of history that now feels very different. So we're rapidly moving through time, and I really wanted to capture that moment in that time. And that was something I'd learned from the pack, was that with recorded delivery verbatim, the quicker you can get to interview people when things have occurred, the more kind of fresh and energized the voices are and the material is. I wish I'd got to the mothers earlier. It was already a little bit too late. But anyway, I'm a working mum. I was running a department. I'm also an artist, and I've got 3 children. And I was very aware of this kind of perception of what I was specifically interested in mothers, what their experience was and what was going across on social media and, pictures and images. And I felt, there were a lot of pictures of cakes and nice paintings and all of that. And I was like, this is not what I'm experiencing. Help. And so I wanted to get a range of voices, because I think social media, we have the danger of falling into this providing this perception of ourselves as being really together and with it and everything being fine, when it totally wasn't. Like, we were in crisis mode, most of us, and just trying to get through the day. So it's specifically homeschool mothers in lockdown, and it was the homeschool experience that I was interested in, working in education with young people myself, but feeling like I was completely failing on a personal level. And so that's where it came from. And I wanted to get a range of voices. So I wanted to find the real kind of the complete meltdowns that were happening in my house, as well as if these, the mothers who had it all together, like, how did they do that? And also there was a big range of voices in there. So I interviewed 10 mothers, I think it was, and start like this through Zoom. And I made a call out, and I'm part of a group called Mothers Who Make, which is a wonderful community of creative mothers of all different forms and all different backgrounds and experiences. And so I reached out to mothers across the Southwest, and I interviewed 10 different mothers, and some of those interviews were kind of chats. When I say interviews, they were chats, really. Some would go on for an hour and a half with a cup of tea and just a complete and then I can't remember why, but the limitations of I had to edit that material down, like with the pack. So it was about editing the material down to the essence of what is this person saying and what is this character. It was brutal, because I think that was 1 minute in the end. Had to edit it from an hour and a half to 1 minute, and still feel like I was representing that person and being honest to that person, and trying not to offend them by saying, well, this is the minute and a half that I feel captures what you've just said. So there's a lot of kind of ethical things behind recorded delivery verbatim, which as an artist I really worry about sometimes, that we're taking it from a person into a piece of art, but that is still a person, and I had a lovely conversation with that person for an hour and a half.
An interesting aspect to the Mothers in Lockdown project, I think, is that idea of you going and meeting with somebody and kind of recording their voice. You voice it yourself, but it's kind of their stories. They own their stories in a way, and you're presenting them in a slightly different way and in a different context, in a theatrical way. It's a little bit like when the photographer goes out and shoots some pictures of people and sticks them on an art gallery wall. And I wondered what your thoughts were around, that idea of consent and ownership.
Yeah, and I think the anonymity behind it. So when the participants agree to take part, they do sign release forms, and I say, as an artist, I'll take away all names and identities, and so that kind of, that sort of supports that a little bit. But and also I wanted to reflect back to the audience a range of experiences, and so it might be that particular 1 minute doesn't fully represent that person, but it provides a range within the 9 voices that ended up being in there.
The space in of itself should be quite an interesting space to be in, quite a playful space to be in. It's a bit of a puzzle, figuring out which objects are going to create the sound, and as I say, there's no need to actually touch the object. So it should be quite a fun space as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Selina.
Yeah, so originally it was online, as you said, Rich, and the audience was clicking with the mouse. And we want the audience to be able to control their experience of their interaction with the piece in the exhibition. But obviously, due to COVID, that poses challenges. So if you want an interactive recorded delivery verbatim installation, but an audience can't touch, you can only have a small number at a time. You need to be able to control from an artistic and curator's perspective how that audience interact. And so we looked at retaining the 9 characters and allowing the audience to be able to control which voice they listen to when. And we took the kind of the grid interface idea that was originally online, and that was 9 different images. So for example, there was a chalkboard, there was a pair of slippers, and then we thought about how that might manifest itself in real life in a space. So the Princess Theatre in Burnham have allowed us to use a room, and the audience will experience that. They book in to go and see the installation, so they'll experience it in small groups. So we went to the Princess Theatre last week in real life, which was very exciting. So we played around with objects, didn't we, Rich? And the idea of the images from the grid, and if that was an object that kind of represents that mother, what objects might we put in the exhibition? So we laid out a table. This was just an experimenting in how to set up the piece. We laid out a table, and I collected a number of objects that I felt represented homeschool for mothers, and so we did have a pair of slippers. We had a packet of cheesy ball crisps, because one of the voices refers to cheesy balls and cider as being a staple diet through lockdown. And then we had drawings and crayons and things like that, and we tested out. Well, you can say more, Rich, about kind of which objects work, but we tested out the touch sensors against the objects.
Yes, so the digital element of the Mothers in Lockdown installation, it uses something called a touchboard. So a touchboard, I've got one here. It's just a little thing like this, and it's got, as you might notice, 9 little connections with wires coming out at the other end. And at the end of each of these wires is an object. And those objects, what this touchboard enables those objects to be, is touch sensitive, touch devices, if you like. So one of the objects in Selina's exhibition is a cap. That's going to be placed on a table. And the idea is that when you touch, or even with proximity, get your hand near to the cap, the touchboard will trigger a sound, and it'll trigger one of the sounds, obviously, that Selina has previously recorded. So what we're aiming for in the installation is a tabletop full of objects, 9 of which trigger sounds. And I've given you a bit of a clue, actually, as to what one of the objects will be. So when you go and visit the exhibition, you'll know that the cap is one of the touch-sensitive objects. And it's quite a clever little device. At the end of each of these wires is a little bit of copper wire, and with a little crocodile clip attached to the other end. And what we'll do, this is kind of behind the scenes, this copper wire will be attached to a ball of foil, and it's actually the ball of foil that is the kind of the proximity sensor, and that will be placed inside the cap. So little trick of the trade there. So we're using some quite simple, readily available technology to create what hopefully is going to be very interesting, thought-provoking and kind of inventive installation. So what we've been chatting about here is an installation, and it's probably quite tricky for the viewers to get a real notion of what this thing might look and sound like. So the best thing to do, I think, is to go and visit the installation at the Princess Theatre. There's going to be other exhibitions on as well, but I think from the 19th of June it's a good time to pop along to the Princess and take a look at Selina's work. And all being well, if all's working okay, you'll be able to go into a room and you'll see an object. So you see a tabletop full of objects, some of which trigger sound via proximity of your hand to the object. So go and take a look at it.
Yeah, it's a great place for an audience to play around with the idea of proximity and what actually triggers a sound and what doesn't, which are the objects that I'm looking for, because our aim is to put a number of objects on the table, so it's almost like a game where the audience have to guess which object triggers the sound. Another challenge that was there, as well as proximity and transferring from an online interface to a real life installation, was around defining the characters as being different, because it's my voice that is speaking the words of each person that I interviewed, to remove the identity and to play around with this technique of recorded delivery verbatim, which I'm really interested in artistically. We then kind of realized when we were in the room that actually when you don't control with a mouse and click, and you know you're in control of that, and you know sort of the grid online interface directs the eye that this is a different person, that this is a different character. But when you've got random objects on a table, your brain doesn't quite connect in the same way. So we talked about framing the voice with a sound or something that identifies to the audience that this is, for example, let's say this character Louise. This is Louise speaking, and these are Louise's objects. So it's interesting how taking a piece of art from an online interface into a different sort of medium in a different place changes the audience experience. And artistically, I still wanted to have the same journey, so the audience are listening to different mothers.
Great. So what's next for you, Selina? What are you exploring next?
Yeah, so we've as far as recorded delivery verbatim goes, I think it's interesting, isn't it, with COVID, that we have to kind of take those opportunities to work slightly differently. So I'm currently working, thanks to Seed Sedgemoor, I'm working with Hybrid Youth Theatre. We've got 2 groups for young people aged 6 to 11 and 12 to 18. And I'm really interested in the autumn/winter in how we might look at recorded delivery verbatim in playing and making theatre from a young person's perspective. And Ignite Somerset have just been amazing for me as an artist in exploring thank you, Rich, in exploring how my practice can combine with digital creative technology. So I'd love to pass that on to the younger generation and look at something that they want to say and something that they would like to make, and how we might use these technologies in taking that out to audiences virtually or in a space. Who knows what the winter's going to bring, but it'd be great to work with the young people and kind of skill share.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us at the Creative Network. And when you get to do that next project with the young people, certainly, get in touch, because it'd be great to connect with you again and collaborate again. So with that, thanks very much, Selina, and see you soon.
Ace. Thanks, Rich. Thank you.